Hey guys, tonight we begin with a queen who is not wearing a crown the way you might imagine one. There is no bright European throne room, no golden chair placed high above a court, no easy command that makes everyone bow and obey. In the Abbasid Caliphate, at the height of Baghdad's power, the woman you were picturing as a queen would more likely be a caliph's mother, a favoured consort, a royal wife, or a woman inside the guarded household whose influence travelled through curtains. Servants, gifts, whispered reports, and sealed messages. From far away, it sounds like a dream of silk and lamps. Up close, it becomes something much stranger. Power is real, but it has to pass through a door you cannot always open. That is the quiet trap of tonight's story. You would not fail because the palace was poor. You would fail because it was rich in the most dangerous way. Rich in attention. Rich in rivalry. Rich in people who noticed who visited you, who carried your letter, whose name you spoke, whose son you favoured, and whose petition reached the caliph through your rooms. Even a woman with jewels at her wrists and attendants waiting outside her curtain could discover that luxury was not freedom. Luxury was a system. It fed you, dressed you, watched you, and remembered your mistakes. And before we drift into that world, if you enjoy these quiet journeys into the stranger corners of history, you can like, subscribe, and comment where you were listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine the first object in your hand is not a crown, but a folded message. The paper is small enough to hide in a sleeve. It may carry a request for money, a warning about a rival, a plea from a courtier, a note about a sum, or a soft instruction that cannot be spoken aloud in public. You do not simply walk across the palace and deliver it. That is the modern fantasy. In this world, your words need legs that are not yours. The message must move through someone, a servant, a trusted woman, a eunuch at a door, a stewardess of the harem, the qahramanas, whose job could be ordinary 1 hour and politically dangerous the next. She might handle purchases, accounts, jewellery, petitions, prisoners, or the private errands of women who could not freely walk into the male spaces of government. In a palace like this, movement itself is power. The person who can cross a threshold can become more useful than the person behind it. So your first lesson as an Abbasid queen is simple and deeply uncomfortable. You are powerful only if other people keep carrying your power correctly. This is why the title is crueler than it first sounds. The problem is not that an elite Abbasid woman had no influence. Some women had astonishing influence. Al-Khayzuran, the mother of Harun al-Rashid, is remembered as a woman whose presence in politics could not be ignored. Zubayda, wife of Harun al-Rashid, is remembered for wealth, pilgrimage works, and public generosity. Shaghab, mother of the caliph al-Muqtadir, became connected with a court where women of the household and their agents could matter deeply. But these examples do not make the palace safe, they make it more dangerous. The higher you rise, the more your private household becomes a political weather system. You might begin the morning in rooms softened by cushions and screens. There is water brought in, fabric laid out, perfume kept in careful containers, and the slow rustle of people who know where they are, allowed to stand. The palace is not one room. It is a geography of permission. Some doors are for servants. Some doors are for eunuchs. Some rooms are for women of rank. Some passages carry messages outward. Some names can be spoken aloud. and some must be carried carefully, because a name in the wrong mouth becomes a rumour before sunset. You would feel the pressure first as delay. A request does not become action just because you want it. You send for someone. You wait. You ask whether a man has arrived. You wait. You hear that the caliph is occupied, or ill, or angry, or with advisors, or with another branch of the household. You wait. And in that waiting, other people are moving. A vizier is making a case. A commander is seeking favour. A rival household is offering gifts. A servant has repeated half a sentence. A steward has learned which purse is open. You are not outside politics. You are inside it without being able to stand in the open air of it. For a modern listener, this may be the hardest part to feel. We often imagine power as being able to speak directly. You enter the room, you say what you mean, people answer. But Abbasid court power, especially for secluded elite women, often moved indirectly. Influence travelled through kinship, motherhood, money, patronage, and access. A mother of a caliph could become a force because the ruler's body had once depended on hers, because household loyalty could outlast official rank, because a petition whispered through the right rooms might reach a place where formal speech could not. But every indirect path creates a new danger. The messenger can become powerful. The listener can misunderstand. The rival can intercept the meaning. The historian, writing later, can turn the whole thing into a moral warning about women interfering in government. And this is where the archive itself becomes another locked door. We know many of these women through sources written mostly by men, often concerned with disorder, legitimacy, scandal, and the proper shape of authority. When they describe a powerful woman, they may be recording fact. They may also be recording anxiety. So we have to move carefully. Tonight's queen is not a cartoon prisoner, and she is not a secret empress ruling every room. She lives in the uncomfortable space between those simple stories. She may have wealth, servants, and access. She may shape careers and protect clients. She may influence succession by defending one son over another, or by making sure a request reaches the ruler at the correct moment. Yet the same system that gives her influence also surrounds her with witnesses. Her strength has a sound. Soft footsteps outside a curtain, the scratch of accounts, the pause before a servant answers, the faint risk inside a folded note. And now, with that note still waiting in someone else's hand, the palace begins to breathe around you. The person carrying it may know more than you wish anyone knew. That is the second lesson of the palace. In a world of guarded rooms, secrets do not disappear. They change hands. A woman of high rank in the Abbasid household could be surrounded by people who served her, depended on her, and feared her displeasure. But service did not make them invisible. Every cup of water, every purchase of fabric, every request for a physician, every gift sent out of the women's quarters created a small trail of knowledge. The palace did not need modern paperwork to keep a record of your life. It had memories walking on human feet. You would wake into that system before you ever made a choice. Someone would know whether you slept well. Someone would know whether you asked for music or for silence. Someone would know whether you were pleased with a servant, angry with a rival, worried about a son, or waiting for news from the caliph. Even your patience could become information. In ordinary life, a mood might pass and vanish. In the court, a mood could become a clue. The Abbasid palace was not only a private home, it was part of the machinery of rule. The ruler's household, the treasury, the military elite, religious scholars, secretaries, poets, eunuchs, slave servants, noble families, and provincial interests all pressed near the centre of power. Not all of them could enter the same rooms, but they could all hope that a word might travel inward. A petition might find a friendly hand. A complaint might be softened. A promotion might be suggested. A prisoner's fate might be mentioned when the caliph was calm, and because women of the household could sometimes influence access, they became valuable even when they were secluded. That value is what makes your position unstable. To be useful is to be visited. To be visited is to be watched. To be watched is to become a story before you can defend yourself. This is where the qahramana becomes important. She was not simply a maid in the modern imagination. In the Abbasid court, a qahramana could be a female steward, manager, messenger, financial agent, or trusted intermediary attached to the palace household. Some were powerful enough to appear in chronicles by name, which is already unusual in a world where so many servants vanished from the record. A qahramana might handle affairs that touched money, property, petitions, and even legal or political matters. She could pass where others could not. She could hear what others missed. She could make the closed world of the harem touch the open world of the court. If you were a royal woman, you would need someone like her. That dependence would be practical, not decorative. She might know which supplier could be trusted, which eunuch could be persuaded, which secretary was rising, which court faction was dangerous, which complaint should wait until morning. She might know how to phrase a request so it sounded like loyalty rather than pressure. She might know when silence was safer than truth. But dependence is never neutral. The more you rely on an intermediary, the more power gathers around the intermediary. Your influence begins to have a hinge. If the hinge holds, the door opens. If it bends, you are trapped behind it. For a modern person, this would be maddening. You would want direct control. You would want to check the message yourself, see the recipient's face, correct a misunderstanding before it hardens. Instead, you would sit inside a chain of trust. You would choose a servant who would speak to another servant, who might pass a word through a eunuch, who might reach a secretary, who might find the moment when your meaning could be presented without creating insult. At every step, the message could shift slightly. Not always from betrayal, sometimes from caution, sometimes from fear, sometimes because court language was built to protect people from the consequences of plain speech. So the folded note from last night begins to change. It is no longer just paper. It is a test of your whole position. Can you make an intention survive distance? Can you make your authority move without your body? Can you trust the mouth that must become yours outside the curtain? And while that note travels, another pressure gathers around the idea of motherhood. In the Abbasid world, the mother of a caliph could matter enormously. This was not because motherhood was sentimental in the modern, soft-focus way. It was because dynastic politics passed through bodies. A woman who bore a son to a ruler might become attached to the future of that son with a force that no courtier could ignore. If he became caliph, her status could rise with him. Her household, clients, servants, and allies might rise as well. Her enemies understood this. This made a royal woman's body political long before she wanted it to be. Fertility, birth, survival, naming, education, affection, access, and succession were not private milestones. They were political weather. A son could become protection. A son could become leverage. A son could become the reason rivals watched you more closely. If you had no son, your security might feel thinner. If you had the wrong son, born at the wrong time, with the wrong supporters, you might become a problem before you had committed any offense. That is another reason you would not survive easily. The palace could turn ordinary human bonds into strategic risks. To love a child was also to be seen as promoting him. To protect a servant was also to be building a faction. To give a gift was also to announce preference. Even kindness could become evidence. The air inside the rooms would not feel constantly dramatic. Most danger in a palace is not loud. It is slow and administrative. A list is changed. An allowance is delayed. A visitor is stopped at a door. A singer is sent to someone else's gathering. A servant is reassigned. A eunuch becomes less friendly. Your message takes longer to return. Nothing has happened, and yet something has happened. That is the kind of pressure that ruins sleep. You would learn to listen for small changes, not the crash of a coup at first, but the missing courtesy, the late reply, the name no one wants to say, the footsteps that pause outside your room and then continue. In a place where your body cannot simply walk out and investigate, the smallest signs become enormous. By evening, the note may have reached its destination, or it may not. Someone may bring back an answer wrapped in politeness so thick you have to read the fear beneath it. Someone may tell you the matter is being considered. Someone may say the caliph smiled. Someone may say nothing at all. And sometimes silence is the loudest answer the palace can give. The silence teaches you something that no tutor would dare say aloud. In the Abbasid palace, power is not only the ability to command, it is the ability to survive not knowing who has obeyed you. By the third morning, you would begin to understand why patience could become a political skill. The palace is full of people who move carefully because every gesture has a witness. A servant entering too quickly may seem frightened. A eunuch answering too warmly may seem bought. A qahramanas speaking with too much confidence may be accused of reaching above her station. Even the person bringing breakfast might lower her eyes in a way that tells you less than you need, but more than she intended. Outside. Baghdad is awake. The city is not a dream painted behind palace walls. It is a roaring Abbasid capital of markets, mosques, booksellers, bathhouses, workshops, canals, mule carts, scholars, beggars, soldiers, cooks, scribes, and men arguing over money in the heat. You may own property there. You may fund building works, support pilgrims, give charity, or send gifts. A woman like Zubayda could leave a memory in roads, wells, and the pilgrimage route. But if you are inside the guarded household, the city reaches you as filtered noise. You hear news after it has passed through ranks of interpretation. That filter is not accidental. It protects you, and it imprisons you. A palace woman of rank is supposed to be shielded from public exposure, but shielding always has a second face. The same wall that guards your honor also controls your information. The same servant who preserves your privacy can shape your reality. The same eunuch who prevents insult can prevent access. If you cannot see the city directly, then whoever describes the city to you has already begun to rule a little part of your mind. This is why the Abbasid court would exhaust a modern person so quickly. We are used to confusing information with freedom. We check, search, message, call, compare, correct. In the palace, information arrives as weather, late, partial, scented with someone else's purpose. A courtier has fallen. A governor has sent money. A commander is displeased. A jurist has objected. A singer has been favoured elsewhere. A young prince has gained attention. The report comes wrapped in caution, because every fact is also an invitation to react, and every reaction might become the next report. You would learn not to ask questions too openly. A direct question can reveal fear. Too many questions can reveal ignorance. The wrong question can tell a servant exactly where your weakness lies. So you ask sideways. You mention a name gently. You praise someone to see whether the room relaxes. You complain about a delay and watch who looks relieved. You send a small gift and study how long it takes to be acknowledged. Court life becomes a science of tiny returns. And beneath all of this is money. A royal woman might have allowances, estates, jewels, robes, and the ability to patronize people who needed her favor. But money in the palace is never just comfort. It is gravity. It pulls servants into loyalty. It turns poets into praisemakers, petitioners into clients, and distant officials into hopeful correspondents. It can buy fabric, perfume, books, musicians, physicians, prayers, silence, speed, and sometimes mercy. It can also make you visible in exactly the wrong way. If your purse is generous, people gather. If people gather, rivals notice. If rivals notice, they ask why. A gift becomes a sign. A delayed payment becomes an insult. A household account becomes evidence that you are building a circle. To spend nothing is to appear weak or ungrateful. To spend too much is to appear ambitious. You would have to learn the impossible art of making influence look like proper generosity. This is where the pleasant surfaces of palace life begin to turn. Silk is not only silk. It is rank, debt, labor, and memory. A robe given to the right person may warm a friendship. A robe given too publicly may start a rumor. Perfume is not only scent. It is presence in a room after you leave it. A tray of sweets is not only sweetness. It is a sign that someone has been included. The palace teaches you that objects speak, and most of them speak before you are ready. You would miss the simplicity of private ownership. In modern life, if something belongs to you, you imagine it resting quietly in your possession. In the Abbasid court, possession has an audience. Your jewels are seen by the women who dress you, handled by the people who store them, counted by those who manage the household, and imagined by those who hope to receive them. Even a locked chest is social. Someone knows where it is. Someone knows who has the key. Someone knows whether it opened today. That is why the queen of this episode cannot simply be rich and safe. Her wealth is one of the ways the palace reads her. It reads her through gifts, requests, silences, wardrobes, visitors, messengers, and servants. It reads her through the son she favors, the woman she trusts, the prisoner she pities, the singer she rewards, the qahramana she sends too often through a dangerous door. And the sources we have do something similar. They read her from the outside. Chroniclers often notice elite women most clearly when something has gone wrong. A succession struggle, a scandal, an accusation, a court crisis, a strange intervention, an act of generosity large enough to survive. Ordinary mornings vanish. Careful restraint vanishes. 10,000 wise silences disappear, because silence rarely becomes a story. What remains are moments when a woman becomes visible to men writing about power. So we must imagine the missing parts carefully, without pretending to know too much. We can see the structures: guarded households, servants, eunuchs, intermediaries, money, kinship, petitions, rivalry, and the moral suspicion that could follow female influence. We cannot honestly enter every private room and know what each woman felt. History gives us the walls, the doors, the names that survived, and the rumours that hardened into record. The pulse inside those rooms has to be approached gently. By night, you might sit with the account of what was spent that day, or hear it spoken by someone trusted. Oil for lamps, cloth, food, wages, gifts, repairs, a payment made quietly, a request postponed. Each item seems ordinary until you remember that ordinary things keep the palace alive. Not battles, not speeches, not grand titles. Lamps, keys, meals, fabric, paper, and the people who carry them. The folded message from the first night has become part of a wider ledger now. It has cost attention. It may cost money. It may cost trust. Somewhere beyond your room, a man may be weighing whether your request is harmless, useful, insulting, or dangerous. Somewhere inside your room, someone may already be deciding whether your concern is fear, ambition, loyalty, or weakness. And you, surrounded by the softness people envy, have to sleep inside all those possible meanings. Inside those possible meanings, sleep would not arrive like peace. It would arrive like surrender, and even then likely, because the palace never truly stopped listening. Somewhere beyond your room, guards changed position. Lamps burned low. A servant whispered to another servant while carrying away a tray. A eunuch passed a threshold with the careful pace of someone who knew that a hurried body could start a story. The night made things softer, but not simpler. In a court where access mattered, darkness did not erase politics. It only moved politics into quieter hands. By now, you would have learnt that the Abbasid household had its own night language. A door opening late could mean illness. It could mean a message from the caliph. It could mean a musician summoned, a physician called, a prisoner remembered, a woman dismissed, a servant punished, or a rumour arriving too dangerous to wait until morning. You might not know which one at first. You would hear the sound before you understood the meaning. That is one reason a modern person would break here. We are used to thinking danger announces itself. In the palace, danger often begins as ambiguity. A lamp where there should be darkness. A delay where there should be speed. A respectful phrase repeated too carefully. You would have to live inside half-knowledge without showing that half-knowledge had frightened you. And the palace would test you through other women as much as through men. This is not because women were naturally more cruel, or because court life should be reduced to jealous whispers. That would be the cheap story. The deeper truth is that the household placed women in a ranking system where attention, children, money, origin, beauty, age, favour, and access could alter survival. A legal wife, a concubine, a caliph's mother, a princess, a singing girl, a servant, and a qahramanas did not occupy the same world, even when they breathed the same perfumed air. Each had a different nearness to power, and each nearness carried a different danger. If you were imagined as a queen, your rank might protect you from certain humiliations, but it would expose you to others. People would compare your influence with another woman's. They would measure whether your sun was rising or fading. They would notice whether the caliph visited, whether he sent gifts, whether your servant seemed confident, whether your stewardess spoke with unusual authority. Even kindness from above could wound you, because favour shown publicly created a public record of who mattered. The women around you would not simply be companions. Some might be allies, some rivals, some dependents, some informants without even meaning to be. A servant who wants to survive may repeat what she hears because silence feels more dangerous than speech. A young woman newly favoured may become a threat before she understands the rules. An older woman with fewer charms but better memory may know which corridor ruined a previous favourite. The palace keeps its own education, and much of it is taught by watching what happened to someone else. You would have to learn that affection and strategy could share the same cup. You might genuinely love a servant who has been with you for years, and still wonder whether she has family debts outside the palace. You might pity a younger woman placed near the caliph, and still fear what her rise means for your household. You might honour the caliph's mother, and still understand that her favour could lift or crush your own hopes. This is the emotional difficulty of court life. It makes suspicion look practical. The Abbasid harem, like many elite households across history, was not a single mood. It could contain boredom, prayer, music, rivalry, grief, luxury, instruction, illness, pregnancy, old age, and sharp intelligence. There were women whose names vanished entirely, and women whose names survived because they disrupted the public story. There were enslaved women with talents that made them valuable and exposed, freeborn women with pedigree but limited room to maneuver, mothers whose status changed when sons rose, and female agents whose usefulness came from passing between worlds. If you entered this world with a modern idea of fairness, it would feel unbearable. Rank would not always match kindness. Talent would not guarantee safety. Beauty might open a door and then lock it behind you. Motherhood might protect you, only if the child survived, pleased the right people, and stood near the right succession. Intelligence might save you, unless it became too visible. Even piety and generosity could be interpreted through politics. A donation might be holy. It might also be called ambition by someone who disliked you. The pressure would settle into the body, not as one dramatic wound, but as constant adjustment. You would learn how long to pause before answering, how much anger to show, which joke to ignore, which woman to flatter, which servant to reward without making her seem too close, which rumour to crush, and which rumour to let exhaust itself. Your face would become part of your survival equipment. And then there is the question of the caliph himself. To be near the ruler sounds like the centre of safety. It is not. The ruler is the source of favour, but also the source of instability. His mood matters, his health matters, his sons matter, his advisors matter, his debts, wars, pleasures, suspicions and illnesses move through the household like changes in air pressure. If he favours you, rivals may fear you. If he neglects you, dependents may drift away. If he dies, the entire meaning of your life can change before his body is cold. That last truth would sit in the room even on peaceful nights. Every royal household is haunted by succession. You might not speak of it directly. You might not need to. The question lives in the names of boys, in the attention of tutors, in the visits of courtiers, in the generosity shown to one branch of the family and not another. A prince is never only a child. He is a possible future surrounded by adults who have already begun arranging themselves around him. If he is your son, the love becomes heavier. You watch his lessons, his manners, his health, his friendships, and perhaps his enemies. You know that a mistake made by him can stain you. You know that success for him may endanger someone else. You know that another mother is watching her own son with the same mixture of tenderness and calculation. The palace turns maternal hope into a political object and then asks women to carry it gracefully. Late at night, a servant may bring news that a prince has been praised, not your prince, another woman's. The words may be ordinary, almost harmless. He recited well. He rode well. He pleased someone important. You smile because you must. You ask a mild question because you must not seem afraid. But after the servant leaves, the room changes temperature. One small compliment has moved the future a little farther from your bed. This is how the palace defeats the modern fantasy of queenship. It does not always strike. Sometimes it teaches you to understand too much from too little. It gives you silk, and then makes silk into evidence. It gives you servants, and then makes servants into witnesses. It gives you motherhood, and then turns motherhood into succession. It gives you a message, and then makes you wonder who has read it without opening it. And somewhere in the sleeping palace, behind another curtain, another woman is awake for the same reason. Behind that other curtain, another woman may be doing the same careful arithmetic you are, not with numbers written on a tablet, but with glances, silences, visits, and sons. She knows the same palace language. She knows that a compliment can be a signal, that a delayed gift can be a warning, and that a servant's careless pause can tell more than a formal report. This is where rivalry becomes harder than simple hatred. In a story made for noise, palace women would hate one another because they are vain, jealous, or cruel. But real court rivalry is usually more practical than that, and more tragic. The household gives people limited forms of safety, then makes those forms compete. If your son's future rises, another son's future may narrow. If your stewardess gains access, another woman's agent loses it. If your purse attracts clients, someone else's circle thins. The palace turns survival into comparison. You would begin to understand that not every rival is a villain. Some are frightened. Some are ambitious because passivity is dangerous. Some are protecting children, servants, relatives, old promises, or the memory of a status they once had. A woman who seems sharp at noon may have spent the dawn wondering whether her household allowance will be cut. A woman who blocks your request may be trying to keep her own door from closing. The cruelty of the system is that it can make reasonable self-protection look like malice from the other side. And still, knowing that would not make you safe. By daylight, the palace resumes its beautiful discipline. Fabrics are folded, floors are swept, hair is arranged, food arrives in the correct order. The body is dressed before the mind is ready. A royal woman cannot simply appear tired, frightened, or resentful. Her appearance is part of the court's emotional weather. If she looks too pleased, people ask why. If she looks too withdrawn, people ask what she knows. If she laughs loudly, it may be repeated. If she refuses music, that too may be repeated. The palace does not need to imprison every word when it can interpret every expression. You would learn to make your face smooth, not empty, because emptiness itself can seem hostile, but calm enough that people cannot easily turn it into news. This is a labour modern people rarely count as labour. The management of expression, the slow breathing before a reply, the smile offered to someone whose success threatens you, the soft answer to a servant who has brought a message that wounds. It is work done with the muscles of the face and the heat of the chest. In an Abbasid court, where poetry, etiquette, religion, lineage and ceremony mattered, the wrong tone could travel. Speech was not merely information. Speech had rank. A command could sound vulgar if too direct. A request could sound desperate if too urgent. Praise could sound like manipulation if too warm. Silence could sound like contempt if held too long. You would not only have to know what you wanted, you would have to know the shape your wanting could safely take. This is why a woman with intelligence might survive better than a woman with only beauty. But intelligence brought its own danger. A clever woman could be useful, admired, feared, or blamed. When later writers described influential women, they often did so at moments when politics had become unstable, and then intelligence itself could be made to look unnatural. A man manoeuvring at court might be called strategic. A woman manoeuvring through the household might be remembered as scheming. The same action can change its moral colour depending on who is allowed to perform it openly. So you would need a second kind of mind. Not just cleverness, but restraint. You would need to know when not to win, when to allow someone else the visible credit, when to let a request appear to come from a man who thinks he invented it, when to accept a smaller favour now, so that a larger door stays open later. Your power would often be strongest when it looked like someone else's idea. That would be humiliating to a modern sense of self. We are taught to want recognition, to own our labour, to have our name attached to our choices. In the Abbasid palace, visible credit could be a trap. A woman too openly powerful invited stories. Stories invited moral judgment. Moral judgment invited correction. If your influence needed to last, it might have to move like scent through a room. Noticed, effective, difficult to seize in the hand. But scent also fades. That is the cost. You might arrange a marriage alliance, soften a punishment, protect a servant, sponsor a scholar, support a building project, or move money toward a charitable work. Some of it might be remembered, much of it might not. A man's official appointment could be written into a chronicle. A woman's pressure behind the appointment might survive only as rumour, accusation, or not at all. If she is praised, the praise may be attached to generosity rather than strategy. If she is blamed, the blame may be sharpened into a lesson about female interference. The archive gives and takes in the same gesture. It preserves names like al-Khayzuran, Zubayda, and Shaghab because they became too important to vanish. But it does not preserve them as they preserved themselves. It preserves them through other people's anxieties, admiration, irritation, and political memory. For every woman whose name survives, many more remain as functions: a mother, a concubine, a slave girl, a singer, a stewardess, a favourite, a wife. History remembers the role even when it loses the person. If you lived inside that, you would feel another kind of fear. Not only fear of being harmed, but fear of being misunderstood forever. A single court crisis could become the lens through which later generations see your whole life. Years of caution could be flattened into one accusation. An act of protection could be described as ambition. A necessary alliance could become a scandal. Your private reasons, if they were never written down by someone who cared to understand them, could evaporate. And still the day goes on. A musician may be summoned. Someone may recite verses. A tray of fruit may appear. The room may be lovely enough to shame your fear. There may be polished metal catching lamplight, soft fabric against your wrist, the sweetness of dates, the low sound of a fountain, a servant's careful hands arranging a cushion. This is part of the difficulty too. The palace can be genuinely beautiful. Beauty does not cancel captivity. Sometimes it makes captivity harder to name. You might sit in that beauty while deciding whether to answer a rival's courtesy. If you ignore it, you seem proud. If you answer warmly, you seem weak. If you answer too slowly, the delay speaks. If you answer too quickly, the eagerness speaks. The smallest social act becomes a corridor with hidden doors. So you choose a gift, not too expensive, not too plain, something that says respect without surrender, confidence without insult. You ask the qahramana to carry it. She understands more than you explain. That is why you trust her, and why you must never forget that she understands. When she leaves, the room seems quieter than before. The gift is gone, but its meaning has just begun travelling through the palace, gathering eyes as it moves. As it travels, the gift becomes less yours with every step. In your room, it was a careful answer. In the corridor, it is a question. In the hands of the qahramana, it is a piece of evidence wrapped in courtesy. She may carry it past servants who pretend not to look. She may pass a eunuch who knows exactly which rooms exchange gifts and which rooms have gone cold. She may pause at a threshold where the air changes, because every boundary inside the palace has its own rules. The gift is small, but the palace is built to enlarge small things. By the time it reaches the other woman, it has collected a trail of witnesses. This is one reason Abbasid court life would wear you down. Nothing remains only itself. A robe is not only cloth. A cup is not only hospitality. A visit is not only kindness. Even absence is not empty. If you do not appear, people ask why. If you send nothing, people ask whether you have chosen silence or been denied the means to speak. In a palace of guarded movement, non-action can sound like a declaration. Your rival receives the gift. Perhaps she smiles. Perhaps she sends thanks. Perhaps she understands the balance perfectly and answers with something equal in value, or just slightly below it, so that the exchange settles without surrender. Or perhaps she sends something richer, forcing the room to notice that she can afford generosity more easily than you can. A gift can soothe a wound. It can also open a measuring contest so delicate that no one admits it is happening. You would have to know how to lose gracefully in such contests. That is harder than winning. If another woman outshines you in public favour, you cannot always strike back. You may need to let the moment pass, because a visible wound gives pleasure to enemies. The palace rewards those who can bleed invisibly, and yet invisible wounds still shape decisions. A woman who has been slighted remembers. A servant who was ignored remembers. A qahramana who was doubted remembers. The court is a memory machine, and it has no mercy for people who think one day can be separated neatly from the next. By now, your survival depends on keeping several kinds of time in your head at once. There is the time of the body: sleep, hunger, illness, pregnancy, aging, the ache of waiting too long in heat or anxiety. There is the time of the household: meals, visits, accounts, washing, dressing, religious observance, music, instruction, the soft machinery that makes rank visible. Then there is dynastic time, the slow, terrifying clock of sons growing older, rulers weakening, factions forming, officials rising and falling. A modern person might think she could endure the palace by being sensible, kind, and intelligent, but the palace does not reward virtues in a clean order. Kindness without caution can expose you. Intelligence without patience can frighten people. Generosity without calculation can make you look like you are buying loyalty. Piety can protect your image, but even piety can be read politically if the donation is large enough, public enough, or inconvenient to someone else's story. You begin to understand why women in such households often worked through layers, not because they were childish, passive, or naturally secretive, but because the institution made directness expensive. If you want a prisoner treated more gently, you may not demand it as power. You may present it as mercy. If you want a courtier advanced, you may not say he is yours. You may praise his usefulness to the caliph. If you want a son protected, you may not always speak like a mother. You may speak as someone concerned for order, dignity, and the future of the dynasty. The language has to wear a mask that fits the room. That mask can save you. It can also separate you from yourself. After months or years, you may no longer know how much of your gentleness is real and how much is strategy, how much of your patience is wisdom and how much is fear. The palace teaches performance so thoroughly that even private emotion begins to arrive dressed for inspection. Still, daily life continues with a softness that almost mocks the pressure underneath it. A servant combs hair, someone folds a veil, the scent of rosewater hangs in the room. A cup is placed near your hand. You hear low voices beyond a screen, and for a moment, if you did not know better, the world might seem only comfortable. This is how luxury deceives people outside it. They see the cup, not the hand that may be trembling before it takes the cup. There are moments of real pleasure. We should not flatten these women into pure suffering. There may be laughter among trusted attendants. There may be poetry, music, religious devotion, conversation, jokes too quiet for chroniclers to keep, affection between women who share a confined world, pride in a child, satisfaction in a plan that works, delight in a beautiful object, relief when a message returns safely. A life under surveillance is still a life. People still find warmth inside systems that limit them, but warmth does not remove the structure. It only makes the structure more human. The same servant who laughs with you may be questioned later by someone else. The same music that calms the room may remind you that entertainers rise and fall by favor. The same child who brings joy may become the center of danger. The same qahramana who protects your interests may become so necessary that others begin to resent her access. And resentment has a way of searching for a legal shape. In the Abbasid court, accusations did not need to begin as grand charges. They could begin as murmurs about improper influence, excessive spending, hidden loyalties, bad advice, or women reaching beyond the proper order of things. The accusation might not even name you directly at first. It might circle your servants. It might question your stewardess. It might attack someone you protected, because wounding a dependent can be safer than striking at you openly. This is another way the palace turns power into vulnerability. The people who extend your reach also extend the surface on which enemies can strike. If your qahramana is accused, your judgment is questioned. If your servant is bribed, your privacy is pierced. If your client behaves badly, your patronage becomes suspect. If your son offends the wrong faction, your motherhood becomes a political liability. You might hear the first sign through a softened report. Someone says there has been talk. Someone says a name has been mentioned. Someone says it is probably nothing. In the palace. Probably nothing is one of the most frightening phrases in the world. You do not panic. You cannot afford panic. You ask who said it, but not too sharply. You ask who heard it, but not too eagerly. You ask whether the caliph knows, but with a voice calm enough that the servant can repeat it later without making you sound afraid. Then you send for the qahramana, because once again your fate is moving outside your room, and once again you need another person to bring it back alive. When she enters, the light is low. She bows, waits, and says only what is necessary. The rumour has not become an accusation yet. That is the mercy. It has also not disappeared. That is the danger. That danger sits beside the mercy like two cups on the same tray. One is sweet enough to drink. The other may already be poisoned, though no one has named it yet. Your qahramana does not waste words. If she is skilled, she understands that panic is contagious in a palace. A frightened whisper can travel faster than an official order. So she gives you only what has weight. A certain servant was questioned. A certain secretary laughed at the wrong moment. A man connected to a rival household asked whether your people had been sending gifts too freely. No charge has formed, not yet, but the air has changed. You feel the old problem again. You cannot simply walk into the court and correct the story. You cannot stand before the caliph's advisors and say, "No, this is false. This is smaller than you think. This is only envy wearing moral clothing." Your defense must travel by the same fragile routes as your influence, through tone, through timing, through another person's mouth. So the first question is not, what is true? The first question is, who needs to believe what before the rumour hardens? This is one of the quietest cruelties of Abbasid palace life. Truth matters, but it does not move alone. Truth needs access. Truth needs a listener who is not already tired of your name. Truth needs the right hour, the right messenger, the right phrase, and sometimes the right gift arriving just before it. In a court, a fact can die in the corridor if the wrong person carries it. You ask the qahramana who has heard the talk. She names no one casually. Every name is a small door. Open it too quickly, and you may expose another passage behind it. Perhaps the rumour has touched a eunuch near the outer rooms. Perhaps it has reached a clerk who records payments. Perhaps it comes from a woman whose own household has recently lost favour. That last detail matters. People who are falling often pull at the robes of people still standing. A modern person might want a clean investigation. Who started it? What did they say? What evidence exists? But the palace is not a courtroom arranged for fairness. It is a living organism protecting itself. Sometimes the safest answer is not to confront the source. Confrontation proves you are afraid. Sometimes the safest answer is not silence. Silence lets the rumour grow roots. You must choose the middle path, the one no tired listener would find easy. Answer without appearing to answer. Perhaps you send a public act of calm, a routine payment made exactly on time, a courtesy to someone neutral, a small kindness toward a servant from the rival household, visible enough to be reported, not large enough to look like fear. Perhaps you reduce gifts for a few days without making the reduction obvious. Perhaps you allow one trusted person to repeat, gently, that your household has no interest in disturbance. You do not deny the accusation. Denial gives it a body. You change the room around it until it has less air. This is exhausting because it asks you to fight without seeming to fight. A queen in a fairy tale can command a punishment. An Abbasid palace woman who wants to survive may have to command a mood. And moods are unstable things. The caliph's household is never isolated from the larger empire. Beyond the curtains are armies needing pay, provinces sending revenue, scholars arguing over authority, secretaries managing documents, judges weighing law, and factions trying to make their private interest look like public order. The harem is not a little decorative island beside government. It is one of the places where government becomes personal. The ruler's sleep, desire, grief, illness, children, and household loyalties can alter politics as surely as a signed decree. That is why accusations about household women are rarely only about household women. When chroniclers speak of a mother, a favourite, or a stewardess becoming too influential, they may also be describing the fears of officials who did not control that route to power. A man who loses access through the formal court may blame the curtain. A faction defeated in policy may say the ruler was misled by private hands. Sometimes the accusation may be true. Sometimes it may be a way to make male failure sound like female disorder. You would have to live under that suspicion even on days when you did nothing, especially on days when you did nothing, because stillness can look like plotting when people already fear you. The rumour, then, is not only an event. It is a test of how the court imagines women with influence. If your qahramana is clever, she will know this. She may advise you to make the household look orderly, not weak, not defensive. Orderly. The accounts clean, the servants quiet, the gifts modest, the prayers visible enough to be known but not performed like theatre, the doors controlled, the language soft. For a few days your life narrows. You hear less music. You ask fewer questions. You allow the palace to see a version of you that is almost boring. This is not peace. It is strategy disguised as domestic calm. Inside, though, the body keeps score. Your neck aches from holding the same composed position. Your jaw tightens before every report. Sleep comes in broken pieces. Food tastes slightly distant. You find yourself listening for footsteps even when none are there. You begin to understand that survival at court is not simply avoiding death or disgrace. It is enduring the body's constant preparation for a blow that may never come. And then, just when the rumour seems to be thinning, the palace offers a different danger. Opportunity. A message arrives from beyond your rooms. Someone important wants your support. Not openly, of course. Openly, it is a request for help, a petition softened by respect, perhaps a plea on behalf of a man who has served faithfully or a family facing loss. But beneath the courtesy lies calculation. If you help, you gain a client and a debt. If you refuse, you make an enemy. If you wait, you appear uncertain. If you act too quickly, you prove that your hand is stronger than you have been pretending. The timing is almost cruel. When suspicion surrounds you, even mercy becomes risky. Yet refusing mercy can stain you too. You are expected to be generous, especially if your rank is high. A great woman should protect, give, soothe, and intercede. But every act of intercession places your name near someone else's fate. You sit with the message while the lamps burn lower. The paper is light, but the choice is not. Somewhere outside, a man hopes your favour will save him. Somewhere else, an enemy may be waiting to say your favour proves exactly what they feared. So you fold the message again, slowly, as if neatness could make the world more orderly. The room is quiet. The qahramanas waits. And for a moment, the whole machinery of empire seems to rest on whether you dare to be kind. Whether you dare to be kind becomes the question that separates palace fantasy from palace life. In an ordinary room, kindness may feel simple. Someone asks for help. You decide whether help is deserved. But in the Abbasid court, kindness has a shadow. It creates a trace. It chooses a side. It tells the people watching you that your hand can still reach beyond your curtain. The qahramanas waits because she knows the choice is not only about the petitioner, it is about the condition of your name. A name in the palace can be strong, damaged, useful, dangerous, exhausted, or newly interesting. Yours has recently been touched by rumour. That means every movement around it will be read with fresh hunger. If you intercede now, someone may say you are bold. If you refuse, someone may say the rumour has frightened you. If you send help quietly, someone may still discover the path it took. Quiet things are not always hidden. Sometimes they are only hidden from the person who most needs to know they have been seen. So you ask for the details again, not because you failed to hear them, but because repetition can reveal weight. Who sent the plea? Who benefits if it succeeds? Who loses if it succeeds? Has the man served the caliph, a vizier, a commander, a household faction, or a family connected to another woman inside the palace? Is his trouble legal, financial, political, or personal? Does mercy restore order, or does it look like interference? These are cold questions, and that coldness may shame you. Yet a royal woman who survives cannot afford innocence for long. Innocence is beautiful in stories because stories end before the consequences return. In the palace, consequences come back wearing other people's faces. You may decide on a middle kindness, not a dramatic rescue, not a public demand, a smaller pressure, perhaps a request that the case be reviewed, perhaps money sent through a respectable channel, perhaps a word placed near someone who can act without making your name the centre. The action must be real enough to help, but small enough to deny as politics. This is the palace art, doing something while leaving the world unsure exactly what you did. To a retired modern listener, that may sound unbearable, because it is. It means even virtue must be edited before it leaves the room. You cannot simply be generous, you must be safely generous. You cannot simply be loyal, you must be loyal in a way that does not suggest a private faction. You cannot simply protect someone, you must protect without making the protected person proof of your reach. And all of this happens under a religious and legal imagination that values order, modesty, hierarchy, and proper conduct. The Abbasid court was not separate from Islamic moral language, even when palace life was full of luxury, poetry, music, wealth, and contradiction. People could praise a powerful woman's charity while doubting her political influence. They could accept her patronage while resenting her access. They could benefit from her intercession and then later describe intercession itself as a sign of disorder. The same world could need her and mistrust the fact that it needed her. That double standard would become one of your invisible walls. Men at court also schemed, bought allies, gave gifts, advanced relatives, concealed failures, and used private access. But when women did these things through the household, the story could change flavour. It could become gossip, seduction, improper dominance, a warning about the curtain swallowing the throne. The institution made women indirect, then sometimes blamed them for indirectness. You would learn to hear that blame before it was spoken. A phrase repeated by a secretary. A joke told too carefully. A courtier who praises your piety with a little too much emphasis, as if reminding everyone where your influence ought to end. Compliments can be fences when they are placed in the right tone. So the petition leaves your room transformed into something modest. Your qahramana carries not a command, but a suggestion shaped like concern. It may pass through a eunuch, then toward a man who can mention it elsewhere. No single step looks like power. Together, the steps are power. That is why they are dangerous. While you wait for the result, the palace returns to its ordinary sounds. Water being poured, cloth shaken out, a low exchange at the door. Perhaps somewhere a poet is reciting lines about love or loss, while in another room someone counts payments with a dry finger. The palace can contain beauty and calculation at the same time without seeing a contradiction. That is one of its strengths. You might think of Zubayda not as a fairy tale queen, but as a reminder that royal women could leave marks beyond the harem. Her memory is tied to wealth, pilgrimage, and public works, especially the care of routes used by pilgrims. That kind of patronage matters because it shows a different form of power. Not a woman seizing a throne, but a woman making resources move through a world that badly needed water, roads, safety, and prestige. Yet even public generosity could become part of reputation. A canal, a well, a road, a gift, a purse, a robe. Everything says something about the giver. Your own smaller act may never be remembered. No chronicle will preserve the hour you spent deciding how to help without being destroyed by helping. No historian will record how dry your mouth felt while the qahramanas stood in silence. The archive prefers crisis. It rarely preserves careful mercy. At last, the answer returns. The petitioner has not been fully saved, but the matter has softened. A punishment delayed, a debt reconsidered, a hearing granted. Something small, but not nothing. You should feel relief. Instead, you feel the next layer of fear. Now someone owes you. Now someone knows you acted. Now someone else may wonder why. You understand then that survival is not one decision, but a habit of measuring every good act against the door it may open. The kindness has passed, yet its echo remains in the walls. In the palace, success is never clean. It leaves fingerprints. That evening, you wash your hands before sleep, but the gesture feels almost symbolic. Water moves over skin. The day remains. Somewhere beyond the guarded rooms, a man who may never see your face whispers gratitude for your name. Somewhere else, a rival hears that your name still works. And inside your room, the folded world of paper, favour, rumour, and mercy waits for morning to open again. Morning opens the paper again, but not all at once. It opens first in the way a servant enters quietly, carrying news without wanting to be the shape of the news. It opens in the way the qahramanas asks whether you slept, then waits a little too long before telling you what happened outside your room. The man helped by your small act of mercy has spoken carefully, but gratitude is never completely silent. Someone knows a punishment softened. Someone knows a debt was delayed. Someone knows a name moved through the corridors and reached the right ear. Maybe no one can prove that name was yours. Proof is not always necessary in a palace. Suspicion can live comfortably on less. This is when you learn that doing good can make you look powerful, and looking powerful can make you unsafe. A modern person might expect the palace to punish only obvious ambition, but courts often fear influence before it becomes open. They fear the network forming under the surface. They fear the servant who now owes you, the clerk who has learned your request matters, the petitioner who may return, the rival who may say you are gathering people around you. One act of mercy can look like a seed. The court begins asking what tree you intend to grow. So you must make your own kindness smaller after the fact. You allow others to believe the matter was ordinary. You praise the caliph's justice rather than your own intercession. You let a male official appear sensible. You let the qahramana fade from the centre of the story. You do not collect gratitude where anyone can see it. In the palace, the safest victory is often the one that looks as if it happened without you. But disappearing from your own achievement has a cost. It teaches the people around you that your power must be hidden even when it is useful. It teaches you to swallow the pride of having done something right. Over time, that swallowing becomes part of the royal posture. The face remains calm. The hands rest gracefully. Inside, another small part of the self has been folded away, like a letter no one must find. The court would demand that folding again and again. If you are too passive, you become irrelevant. If you are too visible, you become a threat. If you speak through others, you are accused of intrigue. If you speak directly, you violate the expected shape of seclusion. The room is not designed for innocence. Every path has already been marked by someone else's suspicion. This is why a title like Queen becomes almost misleading here. The modern ear hears Queen and imagines a person with a fixed rank. A crown sits on the head, and the office explains the woman. In the Abbasid household, power could be much more fluid. A woman might rise because the caliph loved her, because she bore a son, because she managed money well, because she had a trusted agent, because she understood men who underestimated the curtain. Then the same woman might fall because the caliph changed, the son died, a faction shifted, an agent was accused, or the moral story of the court turned against her. Rank did not remove uncertainty. It gave uncertainty better furniture. You might spend the afternoon in rooms that seem untouched by danger. Light moves across polished surfaces. Someone brings scented water. A musician's voice, distant and controlled, bends a line of poetry into something tender. The palace seems to be telling you that life is refined, ordered, superior to the dust and argument of the city outside. But refinement is not innocence. The more polished the surface, the easier it is to see a stain. A visitor's name is mentioned. Not a visitor to you, exactly. A man connected to the officials has been seen speaking with a servant connected to another woman's rooms. It may mean nothing. It may mean someone is testing whether the rumour still has force. It may mean a rival is trying to learn whether your household is frightened. Court life trains the mind to multiply possibilities until even harmless things become heavy. You ask no sharp questions. Sharpness gives the report more importance. Instead, you ask whether the household accounts are in order. You ask whether the gifts sent this week were modest. You ask whether any servant has been careless with speech. These questions sound domestic. They are not. You are checking the outer skin of your world for cuts. The qahramanas answers with the calm of someone who knows calm is part of her duty. The accounts are clean. The gifts are proper. The servants have been warned. Gently. No one has been punished in a way that would create resentment. This last detail matters. Fear can silence a household for a day and ruin it for a year. A servant treated harshly may become a doorway for your enemies. A servant treated too softly may become bold. Even discipline must be measured, like medicine. Here, the palace becomes almost medical in its wrongness. Everyone is treating symptoms: a rumour, a gift, a delay, a servant's tongue, a rival's smile. But the deeper illness is the structure itself. Too many people are forced to seek safety through access to one body, one ruler, one household centre. When power gathers so tightly, every private room becomes crowded with public consequence. And for women, that crowding has another edge. The caliph may enter and leave spaces with meanings attached to his sovereignty. You, inside the household, cannot make movement carry the same public legitimacy. If your influence appears, it must often appear as relationship: mother, wife, favourite, patron, mistress of a household, protector of a client. Relationship is powerful, but it is easy for enemies to make it sound personal, improper, or excessive. That is why you begin to fear not only failure, but interpretation. A failed request is painful. A successful request is visible. A neutral act can be misread. A pious act can be politicized. Even grief can become dangerous if the grief belongs to the wrong faction at the wrong hour. By evening, you hear that the softened case has been accepted as ordinary. The rumour has not vanished, but it has lost heat. People are turning toward newer concerns, because a palace never runs out of them. A commander is unhappy. A payment is late. A prince has been praised again. The court's attention moves like a lamp being carried down a corridor, leaving some corners darker and others suddenly exposed. You should feel lighter. For a little while. Perhaps you do. You allow music back into the room. You accept a date from a small dish. You listen to water moving somewhere nearby, steady and indifferent. But the relief is thin, because now you know how easily the next test can arrive. The folded message, the careful gift, the act of mercy, the rumour, the clean accounts, the calm face. None of them were separate. They were all parts of the same lesson. In the Abbasid palace, survival is the art of making power pass through other people without letting it become a weapon pointed back at you. And just as you begin to understand that lesson, a new message comes from a place even more dangerous than rivalry. It comes from the sick room of the caliph. It comes from the sick room of the caliph, and the whole palace seems to lower its voice before the message is even opened. Illness at the centre of power is never only illness. A fever in an ordinary household may frighten a family, call a physician, change the rhythm of meals, and fill the night with prayers. A fever in the caliph's body changes the air of an empire. It touches the treasury, the army, the judges, the provinces, the sons, the mothers, the servants, the men who have been waiting too long for promotion, and the men who have already enjoyed too much favour to survive a change of ruler. You hear only a few words at first. He is unwell. He has not received everyone. Certain advisers have entered. Certain others have been made to wait. The physician has been called again. No one says succession, but succession enters the room anyway and sits down beside you. Your body understands before your mind gives permission. The mouth dries. The hands become too still. You ask the qahramanas to repeat the report, and she does, carefully, without adding fear. A skilled palace agent knows that her tone can either steady the room or shake it. She gives you the facts in small pieces, like someone setting down glass cups in the dark. If you have a son near the line of possibility, the sick room pulls at him even if he is nowhere near it. His name becomes heavier. His tutors matter more. His companions matter more. The people who greeted him yesterday with ordinary politeness may greet him tomorrow with calculation. If he is young, others will imagine ruling through him. If he is older, others will fear what he remembers. If he is weak, he may be used. If he is strong, he may be targeted. If you do not have such a son, the danger is different, not absent. A new ruler may not need you. A new ruler may resent you. A new ruler's mother may take the place you once occupied in the hidden weather of the household. Your servants may begin measuring their loyalty against the next possible dawn. Even affection can become uncertain when everyone is trying to survive the future. This is the moment when the beautiful rooms reveal their true function. They are not outside the state. They are one of the chambers through which the state trembles. The caliph's bed, screened and guarded, becomes more important than any throne. People who cannot approach it try to approach someone who can approach someone who can approach someone who has heard what happened beside it. News moves in rings, losing certainty as it gains speed. You would want to know whether he spoke, whether he asked for a son, whether he mentioned a name, whether he dismissed a minister, whether he prayed clearly, whether he recognized the people around him. Every detail could become political material. A cup taken from a certain hand, a whisper heard by a certain servant, a visit allowed or denied. In the sick room, even weakness becomes evidence. And yet you must not appear hungry for evidence. That is the cruelty of it. You need information urgently, but urgent need is dangerous to show. If you ask too much, people may say you are waiting for death. If you ask too little, you may be blind when the palace changes shape. So you ask in the language of care. Is he resting? Has the physician been satisfied? Should prayers be arranged? Has the household been told how to maintain calm? Care is real. Strategy is real. They do not cancel each other. That is what the palace does to human feeling. It folds tenderness and calculation into the same gesture until no outside observer can separate them cleanly. Somewhere, perhaps, another woman is asking the same questions, with a different son's name beating behind her ribs. The caliph's mother, if she lives, may hold memories no official can match. A wife may fear being replaced by the future. A concubine may wonder whether her child has become precious or doomed. A qahramanas may calculate which door will matter tomorrow. A eunuch may decide which loyalty is safest if the ruler's breath weakens before dawn. You begin to see why palace histories so often become stories of intrigue at moments like this. The sick ruler creates a vacuum before he is gone. People lean toward it. They deny that they are leaning. They speak of health, prayer, duty, order, and proper conduct. But underneath those words lies the simple fact that everyone knows the body in the sick room may soon stop holding the world together. For an Abbasid royal woman, this crisis can sharpen every old vulnerability. Your influence was already indirect. Now indirectness becomes more dangerous because time may be short. The message that once could wait until tomorrow must move tonight. The servant who once could be tested slowly must be trusted now or not at all. The qahramanas who carries your meaning may become the hinge on which your household's future turns. You might send a careful inquiry, not about succession, never so nakedly. You ask whether additional comforts are needed. You offer prayers, supplies, perhaps a physician known to your household, perhaps a reminder of loyalty phrased so softly that it cannot be accused of ambition. The message must sound like devotion, while listening for the shape of power. Then you wait again. Waiting beside illness is different from waiting beside rumour. Rumour spreads outward. Illness pulls inward. The palace seems to contract around the caliph's bed. Corridors become quieter. Servants move with strained discipline. Music may stop, or soften, or continue in some distant room because the court has not yet decided what mood is safe. Everyone watches everyone else for the first public sign of what private people already fear. A tray comes in untouched from another room. That is all. No announcement, no decree. Just food carried back with too much still on it. You look at the tray and understand that appetite has become news. By night, the lamps burn with a different patience. The folded messages are no longer only about gifts, favours, and accusations. They are about survival after a possible death. The caliph still breathes, and already the future is dividing the palace into those who may rise, those who may vanish, and those who will pretend tomorrow that they never guessed at either. You sit very still, because stillness is the last privacy left to you. Outside your curtain, footsteps pass, pause, and pass again. Somewhere beyond them, the sick room holds the body around which your whole world has been arranged. And for the first time, you understand that the most dangerous door in the palace is not the one that locks you in. It is the one that may open after he dies. The door that may open after he dies is not made of wood alone. It is made of names, loyalties, debts, old promises, and the sudden courage of people who were quiet yesterday. By dawn, the palace has entered the strange hour when nothing official has happened, but everyone behaves as if history has already leaned forward. The caliph is still alive. That must be said. Servants repeat it gently, almost like a prayer. He is still alive. He has slept. He has taken water. The physician has not left. Each small report is offered as reassurance, but each one also proves that the household has begun measuring life in sips, breaths, and visits. You would feel time becoming granular. Not days now, not even hours, moments. Who entered before sunrise? Who came out pale? Which advisor was refused? Which prince was summoned? Which mother received news quickly? Which woman learned only after everyone else? Information is no longer merely useful. It is rank made visible. If the caliph improves, all this may have to be forgotten politely. That is another palace skill, pretending the emergency did not reveal too much. Men who hurried to one faction will smile at another. Servants who guessed wrong will lower their eyes. Women who sent careful messages will fold their concern back into ordinary courtesy. The court must sometimes erase its own panic in order to keep functioning. But if he worsens, the panic becomes architecture. Your rooms begin to feel smaller. Not because the walls have moved, but because every possible future presses inward. If your son is a contender, you may need to secure him without making him look like a conspirator. If your son is not a contender, you may need to protect him from those who imagine he could become one. If you have no son, you may need to attach yourself to the future before the future decides you are leftover furniture from the last reign. That is a brutal phrase, but courts can be brutal in exactly that domestic way. A woman who was central yesterday can become inconvenient tomorrow. Her servants may be reassigned, her allowance may be questioned, her petitions may slow, her rooms may remain beautiful while their meaning changes. The cushions are still soft, the lamps are still lit, but the current of attention has flowed elsewhere. You send for the qahramanas again, and this time the conversation has less softness around it. She knows the names you need before you speak them. The commander whose loyalty is uncertain, the secretary who has been too friendly to another household, the eunuch near the sick room who can be trusted only if approached through gratitude, not payment, the older servant who remembers a previous succession and still trembles when she hears hurried steps at night. Every person becomes a bridge or a broken plank. You ask whether a message can reach your son. Even the question must be shaped carefully. You cannot sound as if you are calling him to power. You may only sound as if a mother wishes to know that he is composed, loyal, and ready to behave with dignity. But everyone understands that dignity, in such a moment, is not innocent. A prince who appears too eager is dangerous. A prince who appears too weak is finished. A prince who appears calm may frighten those who depend on his confusion. So your message to him cannot simply say, "Be careful." It must teach him how to be seen. Do not rush. Do not laugh too loudly. Do not avoid the men who must not feel insulted. Do not trust praise arriving too early. Remember who watched you when you were a child. Remember who ignored you. Say less than you know. Pray where people can see piety, but do not perform grief before grief has been announced. Let your face belong to the dynasty, not to fear. What a strange thing to send a child, or a grown son who is still a child to you. Not love first, not comfort first, instructions for being observed. This is one of the saddest costs of royal motherhood. The palace does not allow maternal love to remain only maternal. It turns love into training, training into factional discipline, and discipline into evidence of ambition. If you prepare your son well, people may say you have plotted. If you fail to prepare him, the palace may eat him alive. There is no pure place to stand. The qahramanas listens, then repeats the message in a form that can travel. She removes the heat from it. She makes it courtly, loyal, almost dull. This is her genius. A dangerous sentence becomes a respectable one. A mother's fear becomes household concern. A political warning becomes advice about composure. Without women like her, many royal women would have had influence trapped inside their own throats. Still, each translation costs something. Your meaning survives by becoming less naked. By the time it reaches your son, it may sound calmer than your heart. Perhaps that is good. Perhaps that is how love lives in the palace, disguised as etiquette. The day stretches. At some point, you hear that the caliph spoke. No one agrees on what he said. One person says he asked for water. Another says he named a servant. Another says he seemed to recognize a prince. Another says he did not. The difference between these reports could be meaningless, or it could become the seed of a future claim. In courts, memory begins forming before the body has finished dying. You understand now why witnesses matter. Who stood near the bed? Who heard the words? Who can swear the ruler wanted this son, this advisor, this arrangement, this mercy, this punishment? A sick room can become an archive before dawn. People may later argue over a phrase spoken through fever, a gesture of the hand, a glance toward a familiar face. The body of the caliph is weak, but the stories around it are already preparing to be strong. And you, behind your curtain, are part of those stories whether you wish to be or not. As evening arrives, the palace does not relax. It holds itself in suspension. Food is sent. Lamps are trimmed. Prayers are murmured. No one wants to be the first to behave as if the rain is ending, and no one wants to be the last to understand that it has. You sit with your hands resting quietly, aware that your stillness may be reported as dignity, coldness, fear, wisdom, or guilt, depending on who needs which meaning tomorrow. Then the qahramana returns. Her face tells you nothing. That is why she has survived. She bows, waits until the servant behind her withdraws, and says the caliph has asked for certain people to remain near him through the night. Your son's name is among them. For one breath, the room disappears. Not visibly, the lamps remain. The cushions remain. The faint scent of rosewater remains. But inside you, every careful wall gives way at once. Then the palace returns, because it always returns, and you make your face calm before anyone can decide what your love has revealed. You make your face calm before anyone can decide what your love has revealed. And that may be the most unnatural movement your body has ever made. A mother should be allowed to react when her son is called near a dying ruler. She should be allowed to stand too quickly, ask too many questions, reach for a wall, pray aloud, or weep before she knows whether the summons means honor or danger. But the palace does not give motherhood that kind of privacy. The palace watches the first second after the news, because the first second often tells the truth that training tries to hide. So you lower your eyes. You ask whether he was summoned alone or with others. You ask who carried the order. You ask whether the caliph spoke clearly. Each question is wrapped in dignity, but beneath it your mind is already running ahead, opening doors, measuring corridors, imagining your son standing among men who may be smiling at him as if they do not need him alive tomorrow. The qahramanas answers carefully. Others were named. That is good. Or it may be bad, because a group can hide a trap more easily than a single invitation. The order came through a proper channel. That is good. Or it may only mean that someone powerful wanted the summons to look proper. The caliph's voice was weak, but understood. That is good. Or it may become contested if the night ends badly. Nothing in the palace is allowed to remain simple. You ask that your son be reminded to show loyalty, not eagerness. The qahramanas understands. He must not look like a man arriving for inheritance. He must look like a son of the house coming to serve the living caliph. There is a difference, even if everyone in the corridor is thinking of death. This is where royal education becomes a kind of theatre. A prince must learn law, lineage, manners, poetry, riding, religion, and the art of being watched. He must know when to speak and when silence looks stronger. He must know that grief can be too theatrical, but calm can be too cold. He must move as if he belongs near power, without looking as if he has reached for it. And if he fails, people may not blame only him. They may say his mother taught him arrogance, fear, weakness, or ambition. Your body is absent from the sick room, but your motherhood is judged there. As the night deepens, reports arrive in fragments. He entered. He bowed. He remained quiet. He was seen near a certain advisor. He did not speak with another prince. He accepted water. He left the room once and returned. Each fragment is tiny, but your mind turns it over like a jewel looking for a crack. Was he wise to stay quiet? Did silence make him seem obedient or dull? Did he stand too near? Did he seem chosen? Did he seem ignored? You begin to understand that the palace makes interpretation endless because the stakes are too high for certainty. Everyone is reading behavior as if behavior were a document. A prince's posture, a servant's route, a physician's tired face, a tray left outside the door, a lamp burning longer than usual. All of it becomes text. The palace is full of people who cannot touch the future, so they study signs. And signs are dangerous because they can be arranged after the fact. If the caliph survives, the night may become a lesson in loyalty. If he dies, it may become evidence. Someone will remember who entered first. Someone will swear that a name was spoken. Someone will say your son looked prepared, which could mean dignified or guilty. Someone will say another prince wept, which could mean loyal or weak. The same moment will divide into rival memories before dawn. You cannot control that. You can only prepare your household not to add careless fuel. The servants are told to keep ordinary discipline. No loud whispers, no visible panic, no sudden packing of valuables, no gift sent without permission, no messenger leaving by an unusual route. The accounts must remain steady. The lamps must burn as they always burn. You are trying to make your rooms look as if history is not pressing its face against the screen, but it is. At some hour when the night feels thinnest, you hear movement beyond the expected rhythm. Not running. Running would be too honest. This is controlled urgency, the kind that tries to sound like routine and fails. A servant enters, then stops too far from you. That distance tells you the news is not ordinary. The caliph has worsened. No one says more for a moment. The words settle into the room and change the meaning of every object. The cushion is no longer comfort. It is where you are expected to remain composed. The lamp is no longer light. It is witness. The folded cloth beside you is no longer household order. It is proof that the room continues to perform calm, while the center of power breaks. You ask where your son is. The answer comes, still near the sick room, not alone, watched, safe, as far as anyone can say. As far as anyone can say is not safety. It is only the border of knowledge. You pray then, perhaps silently, because silent prayer cannot be easily misquoted. You may pray for the caliph's life, because his life still holds the world together. You may pray for your son, because love has become dangerous. You may pray for the servants, the women, the children, the people whose names will never enter a chronicle, but whose lives will be rearranged by the breath of one man. Palace politics can make the heart narrow, but fear sometimes opens it for a moment. Then practical thought returns. If the caliph dies, who will announce it? Who will seal the rooms? Who will control the treasury? Who will guard the princes? Who will tell the women? Who will decide which grief is proper and which grief is suspicious? Death at court is not simply an ending. It is administration beginning under the pressure of tears. Near dawn, the qahramanas comes close enough that her voice can stay low. The caliph still lives, but the physicians are grave. Certain men are gathering. Your son has been told not to leave. The words are simple. Their meaning is not. To be kept near the sick room may be honor, protection, surveillance, or the first move in a struggle no one will name until it is already underway. You nod, because nodding is still possible. Speaking is harder. Outside, the first pale light begins to touch the palace, and it does not feel like morning. It feels like exposure. The night has hidden fear inside lamps and whispers. Daylight will make people choose faces. The court will need to look orderly, even if order has become a curtain with smoke behind it. And somewhere near the caliph's bed, your son is standing inside that smoke, trying to look like he belongs to the future without reaching for it too soon. Near the caliph's bed, your son is standing inside that smoke, and the palace is beginning to decide what his stillness means. No one announces the future plainly. That would be too crude, and perhaps too dangerous. Instead, the future appears as placement. Who is nearest the bed? Who is asked to withdraw? Who is allowed to hear a prayer? Who receives a cup from a servant's hand? Who is seen leaving with a face arranged into sorrow, but not defeat? The sick room has become a stage where everyone must act naturally, while knowing that naturalness itself is being judged. You are not there. Yet you feel every imagined movement as if it were happening inside your own ribs. Your son may be thirsty and afraid. He may be trying to remember every word you taught him. He may be looking at men who once smiled at him when he was small, men who now weigh him like a possible rain. He cannot run to you. You cannot call him back. The palace has taken a private bond and placed it beneath public lamps. The qahramanas give you reports as carefully as a physician gives bitter medicine. She does not tell you too much at once. A certain advisor remained. Another left. One prince spoke. Your son did not answer quickly. That may be wise, or it may be remembered as hesitation. A servant wept outside the door. That may be grief, or it may be fear of choosing the wrong master too early. You begin to understand that succession is not one moment. It is a series of tiny seizures. First, control of news, then control of bodies, then control of doors, then control of documents, treasury, guards, prayer, and language. If the caliph dies, someone must decide when the death becomes public. That delay may be a few breaths, or a few hours, but inside that delay the world can be rearranged. This is the part of queenship that no jewel can soften. You may have spent years building influence through patience, gifts, servants, piety, and motherhood. Yet, in the hour of transition, all that work has to pass through other people's hands at terrifying speed. The men near the ruler's body may not hate you. They may even respect you. But respect is a weak rope when armies, offices, salaries, and survival are pulling from the other end. You ask whether the treasury is guarded. The question sounds too direct, so you rephrase it. Has order been maintained near the offices? Are the usual men at their posts? Has any unusual instruction been sent? The qahramana hears the true question under the polite one. She answers in the same careful language. Nothing disorderly has been seen. Certain guards have been doubled. Certain doors are watched more closely than before. There it is again. Doors. The whole episode has been moving through them. The door your message could not cross without a carrier. The door a gift passed through and became evidence. The door around a rumour. The door to the sick room. And now, perhaps, the door between one reign and the next. For a woman inside the Abbasid household, a door is never only architecture. It is law, rank, custom, reputation, and danger made physical. It tells you where your body may go, where your words must be carried, and where your name may arrive before you do. If you could walk freely through every door tonight, you would still not be safe. But because you cannot, every door becomes a question asked by someone else. The palace is quieter now. Not peaceful. Quiet in the way a room becomes quiet when a bowl is about to fall. Servants move with trained faces. The women around you say little. Some may pray, some may calculate. Some may do both without hypocrisy. You notice an older attendant touching the edge of her sleeve again and again. A small motion she probably does not know she is making. Fear has many dialects, and the palace teaches you to read them. At last, a report comes that the caliph has spoken your son's name. Not clearly enough to settle anything, not publicly enough to become a decree, but enough that the room around you changes. A name spoken by a sick ruler can become a bridge, or a blade, depending on who repeats it. You do not smile. You do not ask whether anyone else heard. That question would expose too much. Instead, you ask whether the caliph was comfortable, whether prayers are being maintained, whether your son behaved with proper humility. The phrases are safe. Beneath them, your mind is racing toward the only issue that matters. Who will own that spoken name by morning? If friendly men own it, it may become evidence that your son was remembered with favour. If hostile men own it, it may become a meaningless murmur, or worse, a sign that ambitious people are inventing claims from fever. If no one owns it, it may vanish entirely, leaving only the memory that it might have mattered. This is why the archive later becomes so difficult. Chronicles may tell us who ruled, who fell, who was accused, who gained power, who seemed excessive, who interfered, who was punished, who built, who gave, who manipulated. But the most important seconds may have happened in rooms where no neutral witness stood. A breath, a name, a glance, a son's posture, a mother's hidden terror. History often receives these things after they have already been handled by politics. You are living inside that handling before it becomes history. The qahramanas advises caution without using the word. No extra messages unless necessary. No visible celebration. No special food sent to your son's attendants. No sign that your household believes anything has been decided. If your son's name was spoken, let others carry the news first. Do not appear to seize it. A claim grasped too early can cut the hand. So you wait, though waiting now feels almost violent. The palace seems to demand stillness from you while moving secretly around you. Somewhere, a document may be prepared. Somewhere, a guard may be choosing which order to obey. Somewhere, another mother may have heard the same report and felt the floor tilt beneath her. You look toward the curtain, not because you expect it to open, but because every threshold in the palace has become alive. The first light is stronger now. Soon the court will have to turn whispers into procedure. It will have to decide who stands where, who hears what, and what the world outside the palace is allowed to know. Until then, your son's name hangs in the air like a lamp that has not yet been shielded from the wind. The palace knows how to protect a flame. Hands cup around it. Screens are shifted. Doors are closed softly. Not to make darkness, but to keep the smallest movement of air from deciding too much. Your son's name needs that kind of protection now, and yet the very effort to protect it may prove that it matters. By late morning, the sick room has become less a place than a centre of gravity. People who are not allowed near it lean toward it through other people. A servant listens for a phrase from a eunuch. A secretary waits for a sign from a guard. A woman behind a curtain studies the face of the qahramanas when she returns. Everyone is receiving the same world in different fragments, and each fragment arrives already warmed by fear. You hear that the caliph has slept again. You hear that his breathing is shallow. You hear that one advisor has remained unusually long. You hear that a prince, not your son, was seen leaving with red eyes. The report offers no conclusion, but the palace does not need conclusions to begin rearranging itself. It begins with posture. Men stand closer to some doors and farther from others. Servants ask permission before doing things they did freely yesterday. Someone delays a delivery of fabric because no one wants to be accused of preparing too soon for mourning. Mourning itself has rules. Grief must appear in the right order, with the right restraint, after the right announcement. Too early, and it looks like expectation. Too late, and it looks like indifference. Too loud, and it becomes performance. Too quiet, and it becomes guilt. A royal woman must be ready to grieve before she is allowed to know whether grief is official. That is another way the palace steals the body. It demands rehearsal. Your face must be prepared for death while your mouth still asks after health. Your hands must know how to receive terrible news without clutching at anyone. Your voice must be soft enough for sorrow, steady enough for rank, and empty enough that no one can say you revealed hope. The qahramanas advises that your household remain in ordinary order. Lamps trimmed, accounts kept, servants fed, no chest opened without need, no message sent that could be mistaken for alarm. You obey because order is a shield, but also because there is nothing else to hold. When the centre of the world is a sick man's breath, ordinary tasks become small ropes tied around the room. A tray is brought in. You do not want food. Still, you take something, because not eating may be noticed. The date is sweet, almost painfully so. Its softness against your tongue feels like an insult from a life that continues. Somewhere, cooks are still cooking. Boys are still sweeping. Water sellers outside the palace are still calling in the streets. Baghdad has not stopped. Only the people nearest power have entered this strange pause, where even appetite becomes political. You wonder what your son has eaten. Then you stop yourself. A mother thinks of food. A court thinks of advantage. If you send him something now, it may look tender. It may also look like a signal. If you send nothing, he may be hungry, tired, and alone among men who have eaten well. So even the thought of feeding your child becomes trapped behind calculation. This is the point where a modern person would begin to hate the whole arrangement, not with dramatic rebellion, but with exhaustion. You would hate that love cannot move directly. You would hate that fear must be dressed. You would hate that every human impulse passes first through the question of how it will be read. The palace does not merely confine your body, it delays your heart. Near midday, a second report comes. Your son remains calm. He has spoken little. He was seen offering support to another prince rather than separating himself. The qahramanas says this is wise. It shows loyalty to the house, not hunger for the house. You feel relief so quickly it almost frightens you. Relief is dangerous because it wants to show itself. You lower your eyes and ask whether the caliph has asked for him again. The answer is no. The word lands heavily. No may mean nothing. No may mean the fever has deepened. No may mean another name has become more useful. No may mean the men around the bed are controlling access. In this palace, no is not a closed door. It is a corridor with no lamp. By afternoon, the first official language begins to form. Not an announcement, not yet, but phrases meant to keep the court steady. The commander of the faithful rests. Prayers are requested. Order is maintained. The household is calm. These phrases are made to reduce fear, and because they are made, they increase it. People trust plain words more than polished ones, but courts rarely survive on plain words. You know that if death comes, the polished language will change quickly. Rest will become passing. Illness will become divine decree. Confusion will become orderly transition, if the winners can make it so. A son will become heir, or danger, or memory. A mother will become honoured, restrained, blamed, pensioned, watched, or quietly moved away from the rooms where messages once found her. For the first time in many days, you think not only about surviving power, but about surviving after power has moved on. What happens to the women who belonged to a previous arrangement? Some remain respected. Some are protected by wealth, kinship, piety, age, or the sons they raised. Some lose the current that once carried their names. Their rooms do not vanish. Their jewels may remain. But the stream of petitioners changes course. The qahramana is summoned less often. The servants speak more softly, not from reverence, but from uncertainty. That future frightens you because it is not spectacular. It is a slow dimming. To fall in a palace does not always mean chains. Sometimes it means fewer footsteps outside the door, fewer requests, fewer gifts requiring careful answers, fewer people pretending your silence matters. The world does not shout that you are finished. It simply stops asking. Even this fear must be hidden, because fearing irrelevance is itself a form of ambition. You sit where you have always sat and let the room believe you are composed. The qahramanas stands nearby, the one person who may understand how much movement is happening beneath your stillness. Then, near sunset, the footsteps change again. This time, no one pretends they are ordinary. A servant appears, breath held tight, and behind her, the qahramanas' face has become completely unreadable. The caliph still lives, she says, but the palace has sealed certain doors. And in that sentence, before death has been spoken, you hear the future beginning to lock. Certain doors, not all doors. That is what makes the sentence so cold. If every door closed, the meaning would be obvious. Panic, death, disorder. But certain doors means selection. It means someone has already decided which routes matter, which bodies must be held in place, which messages must slow, and which people should not learn too quickly what others already suspect. The caliph still lives. And yet the palace has begun behaving like a hand closing around water. You do not ask which doors first. You let the qahramanas say it, because asking too quickly would show her where your fear has run. She names them in a low voice: a passage near the sick room, a gate leading toward the administrative quarters, a smaller route used by servants who carry private notes between households. Not the great public entrances, not the obvious symbols, but the veins. The palace is not sealing its face. It is sealing its circulation. Your folded messages, your careful gifts, your little acts of mercy, your son's instructions, your entire life of influence has depended on circulation. Words moving, people crossing, servants returning, eunuchs permitting, a qahramana passing from one world into another. Now the state has reached for the same thing that you have always needed: control of movement. That is when the title finally becomes complete. You would not survive as a queen in the Abbasid Caliphate, because the danger is not only cruelty, rivalry, or confinement. It is that the very tools that let you live as a powerful woman can be taken, slowed, watched, or turned against you at the exact hour when you need them most. You ask whether your son is still inside. The qahramana says yes. Safe, as far as anyone knows. The phrase has returned, and by now you hate it. As far as anyone knows is a curtain pretending to be a wall. It gives shape to ignorance without making it less frightening. You want to send another message. Of course you do. A mother wants words to reach her child. Stay calm. Trust no early praise. Do not let anyone separate you from witnesses. Eat if you can. Pray if you must. Remember that stillness can look like strength, but too much stillness can look like guilt. You want to send all of this and more, but the servant route is sealed, and a message forced through a sealed route announces itself as fear. So for the first time in this whole long chain of rooms and paper, you do nothing. Doing nothing is not peace. It is one of the hardest acts in the palace. Your hands remain still because movement would create evidence. Your mouth remains closed because speech would need a carrier. Your face remains composed because servants are present. But inside, every part of you is walking toward the sick room and being stopped at every door. The palace has reduced you to the thing it always claimed you should be: still, guarded, dignified, contained. Only now that stillness is not virtue. It is helplessness dressed in silk. Night comes slowly. The sealed doors change the sound of the building. Fewer footsteps pass. The corridors seem to hold their breath. Somewhere, someone is turned back with a polite phrase. Somewhere, a servant learns that her usual path is no longer hers. Somewhere, a man who thought he had access discovers that access was only a habit granted by people stronger than he was. Access is never owned. That is the final lesson. It is borrowed from the current arrangement of power. A royal woman may master the borrowed pathways brilliantly. She may build trust, reward loyalty, soften punishments, raise a son, protect a client, manage a household, and leave traces of generosity in the wider world. But if the arrangement shifts, the pathways shift too. The door that opened yesterday can become a wall by sunset. Near midnight, the answer comes without drama. Not a cry through the palace, not a cinematic rush of bodies, a controlled entrance, a low voice, a pause before the words. The caliph has died. For a moment, history becomes incredibly small. Not empire, not dynasty, not chronicles. Just a room, a lamp, a woman, and the knowledge that a man's breath has stopped somewhere beyond several sealed doors. You may have feared this moment for years, but fear does not prepare the body for finality. It only teaches the body to expect pain. You ask about your son. The answer comes carefully. He remains under guard, respectfully, with the others. The word respectfully is meant to comfort you. It does not. Respectfully can mean protected. It can mean watched. It can mean no one has yet decided whether he is future, obstacle, or hostage to order. The palace begins its next performance at once. Grief takes shape. Orders move. Names are handled. Certain people are summoned. Others wait. The news will be prepared for the world outside, polished into lawful language, wrapped in piety, succession, and continuity. By morning, Baghdad may hear that order has been preserved. The city will not hear the small sounds inside your room, the breath you did not release, the servant's sleeve trembling, a qahramanas choosing each word as if stepping across water. And what are you now? That is the question the new reign will answer. Perhaps you become the mother of the future and rise higher than before. Perhaps you become a respected woman of the past. Perhaps you are pensioned, watched, blamed, useful, ignored, protected, or quietly moved away from the warm centre of petition and favour. The palace will not decide all at once. It will decide through doors. Tomorrow, fewer people may come, or more. A messenger may bow deeper, or avoid your eyes. Your qahramanas may be summoned constantly, or left waiting. Your son's name may become command, or rumour. The same rooms will remain around you, but they will no longer mean the same thing. This is the part no fantasy of queenship tells well. The palace does not always destroy you by dragging you into darkness. Sometimes it destroys you by changing the meaning of the light. The lamp still burns. The cushions remain. The water is still poured. The servants still know where to stand. But the current that carried your words through the world may have shifted to another woman, another son, another guarded door. You sit until the first pale morning begins to find the edges of the room. Somewhere, scribes will turn this night into record. Somewhere, men will argue over what the dead caliph wanted. Somewhere, a chronicler may one day decide that a woman influenced too much, or not enough, or in the wrong way. He may never know how much of her life was spent waiting for messages that other people had to carry. And there, at the end, is the image the palace leaves behind. Not a crown, not a throne, not a queen commanding a golden hall, but a folded message stopped at a sealed door, while the woman who once sent power through the corridors sits quietly behind her curtain, listening for footsteps that may never come back.